Hey, let me ruin your childhood for just 1 second. The Frankenstein in your head? Yeah, he never existed. The green skin, the bolts, the lumbering zombie? That wasn't Mary Shelley. That was Hollywood inventing a monster that she never wrote. And the real creature is so much more terrifying because he was never meant to be the villain. Hi friends, I'm Betty Rage, your favorite nerdy goth mom, and this hot mess is Lashes and Lore, where I put on my makeup and I dish about my favorite lore. And today we are digging up the real Frankenstein, the one from the book, the one buried under 2 centuries of Hollywood edits and a cultural game of telephone. This one is near and dear to my heart. I live and breathe the beauty of this book. That's right, today we're doing book/movie lore for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And if you think you know this story, buckle up. It only gets darker from here. So here's the truth that no one warned you about. Every adaptation, from the black and white classics to the campy Halloween masks to the edgy modern reboots, has written Frankenstein into something that Mary Shelley would never really even recognize. The monster didn't start as a mindless brute. Victor wasn't some kind of tragic genius, and the story was never about a rampaging corpse with bad posture. Mary Shelley wrote something much stranger, much sadder, and honestly, much more horrifying. A creature who thought, felt, learned, spoke, and suffered. A creator who abandoned him. And a world that turned him into the thing that we fear. Oh, and if you want to know what products I'm using on my face while I resurrect the truth of this gothic literature, they're all listed down in the description below. All right, let's start at the beginning. Before Hollywood got its grubby little hands on the story and stitched together the monster that you think you know, the real Frankenstein, babes, it's messy, it's dramatic, it's gothic, and it's absolutely nothing like the version that we've been force-fed for a century. So, picture this. It is 1816, and everyone is trapped inside because the literal climate said, I'm doing my villain era. Mary Shelley is a teenage girl vacationing with literary celebrities who love drama even more than I do on a Tuesday. Lord Byron says to Mary, let's all write ghost stories, because of course he did. And Mary, at 18, casually invents what will become the blueprint for modern science fiction. Meanwhile, Percy Shelley is over here encouraging like the original hype man, but make it romantic era emo. And Mary has this nightmare. Like the kind of nightmare that you wake up from and say, oh great, I guess I'm traumatized forever. But instead of, going to therapy like a normal person, she writes Frankenstein instead. And for that, we thank her. But therapy is also important, so that is not the takeaway here. But here's the tea. Mary Shelley did not write about a mute, lumbering green man with bolts in his neck. Her creature is articulate. He reads Milton. He teaches himself language by eavesdropping on a family. Like the world's saddest neighbor, he has emotional depth. He monologues like it's his full-time job. And he is not the villain of the story. I cannot stress that enough. Okay? Mary Shelley's creature is tragic, thoughtful, abandoned, and honestly, more emotionally mature than half the people that I've dated in my 20s. The real horror comes from Victor, our boy genius with moral compass of a wet sock, who creates life and immediately goes, no thanks, and runs away. Victor Frankenstein, well, he is the problem. The creature starts out wanting connection and ends up committing violence only after society repeatedly rejects him. This is literally in the text. The book is right there. Mary was not even subtle about it. So, when people tell you the creature was always meant to be mindless brute, That is a bold interpretation, and by bold, I mean entirely incorrect. Shelley gave us a story about parenthood, responsibility, loneliness, and how monsters are made, not born. And then Hollywood said, "That's nice, Mary, but what if we made him green and gave him the gait of a confused refrigerator?" And that, my friends, is where everything starts to fall apart. Because from the moment that Frankenstein hit Hollywood, the myth got rebuilt from scratch, and the changes were so dramatic that Mary Shelley could literally sue for defamation. Today's video is sponsored by Hero Forge. Okay, real talk. Your browser tabs are a dungeon of chaos, so let's fix that. You've got characters spread across 3 drives, a tablet, and a notebook, and the cat threw up on it. So there's that. Relatable, but also very tragic. You keep telling yourself that you're gonna get organized the next campaign. That's cute. But it's been 4 campaigns and you still can't find that one mini concept from 2022 that you just slayed, but now it can't find it, it's gone. But with Hero Forge, today's sponsor, they offer Hero Forge Pro subscription. You can finally level up, access kit bashing tools, photo booth lighting, campaign folders, and even early access to new armor and mounts. Pro Plus gives you digital credits and themed packs every month, so you can unleash chaos but keep it categorized. And not to mention, you can make the cutest little things now. Look at this. There's a cat. It's the best. So sign up for Hero Forge Pro at heroforge.com, starting at just $3.99 a month, because your characters deserve better filing than your taxes. Let's be real. So back to the lore. So grab your tea if you haven't just yet, because this is the part where Hollywood said Mary Shelley never heard of her. So let's talk about 1931, the year that Universal Studios looked at an articulate, tragic, emotionally complex creature and said, "No, make him a giant baby with neck bolts." And listen, I will be the first to say that I absolutely adore, love Universal monsters. I do. They raised me, they shaped Halloween culture, and they taught me that being pale is a personality. I literally have the creature and the bride tattooed on my leg. I am that big of a fan. But Universal's Frankenstein is about as faithful to Mary Shelley as a gas station slushie to an actual fruit. And here's a couple of reasons why. The bolt neck truth bomb. So first, the neck bolts. Those iconic little metal doodads. Mary Shelley did not order those from the 1818 Gothic Etsy catalog. The bolts were actually invented by Jack Pierce, the makeup artist who built Boris Karloff's look. Why, you say? Because he needed a visual cue for how the creature got electricity into his body. And that's literally it. There's no deep symbolism. There's no canon. It's literally just early 30s special effects logic. And because Pierce painted Karloff's skin green, even though the movie was black and white, suddenly every Halloween costume for the next 100 years looked like a discontinued Shrek prototype in a film that was black and white. Let's talk about the flat head. Why does the creature look like someone tried to store soup in the top of his skull? Well, that again is Jack Pierce. He wanted a silhouette that you could recognize even if you were sitting in the cheap seats. And that's it. No lore, no meaning, just visual branding. This was the original Funko Pop. And as somebody who works in marketing, awesome move, wonderful, that's great. And it actually achieved what he was looking for. However, still not true to the story. Artistic liberties, if you will. And third, Hollywood said, what if we take a creature who quotes Paradise Lost and make him mute? What if we make him lumber around like a toddler wearing cinder block shoes? What if we give him the emotional range of a stunned goat? I am telling you right now, the creature in the novel could outdebate your philosophy professor. The creature in the film could barely say, ugh. So, something was lost. We lost the entire library, actually. And as a fourth point here, Universal didn't adapt the novel. They reinvented it. And they did so on purpose. And here are the reasons why. Marketability. Tragic philosophers don't sell popcorn. Giant monsters do. They wanted a recognizable icon, not an emotionally devastated meditation on trauma. Audience expectations. Early horror depended on clear villains and clear victims. Shelley's book has neither of those. And then you have censorship. We cannot talk about 1930s Hollywood without dragging the Hays Code. So think of the Hays Code as the original hyper-judgmental PTA, only they were censoring every movie ever made in America. And this wasn't just a suggestion, it was enforced law in Hollywood. And what did the Hays Code absolutely despise? Ambiguity and moral complexity. Mary Shelley's entire novel hinges on the idea that the creator, Victor, is the moral monster, and the creature is the tragic victim. That's morally murky. And the Hays Code's number one rule is crime must always be punished, and sin must never be shown as attractive. And gosh, how boring is that? If Universal had followed Shelley's text, they would have had to show Victor Frankenstein, the educated scientist, the hero, as the true villain, and the murderous creature as someone the audience should feel empathy for. And that was a massive flashing red flag to the censors. So Hollywood simplified it, flattened it, literally. And once Universal created the bolt-necked, flat-headed, lumbering green guy, well, that version, he spread like glitter at a craft store. Hammer horror turned him into a gore fest. Young Frankenstein made him a punchline, a perfect punchline, if I may. And TV turned him into a dad on the Munsters, another show that I love. Halloween stores said, you know what, let's mass-produce trauma. And before long, Mary Shelley's original creature was completely erased by a version that was easier to draw, easier to sell, easier to misunderstand. But then, Hollywood started to feel guilty. They realized that they had rewritten one of the greatest monsters in all of literature, so they tried to fix it. So, after Hollywood spent decades turning Frankenstein into the poster child for Monster Energy drinks, the industry suddenly went, wait, should we maybe read the book? And this started the era of, we're going to be faithful to Mary Shelley, followed by 2 solid hours of things that Mary Shelley absolutely did not write. So, effort? I don't know. Let's go through the offenders with love, but also judgment, because why not? First up, we have Kenneth Branagh's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in 1994, or the adaptation that said, I'm going to be faithful, and then immediately took its shirt off and got into bed with somebody else. First, Kenneth Branagh, I totally respect the ambition. I respect that he said, let's bring back the intelligent creature. Let's put the tragedy back in the story. Let's honor Shelley's text. Bless his heart. And then he directed himself, sprinting shirtless through a gothic lab like a Victorian Himbo in Crisis. Robert De Niro as the creature. Genuinely powerful. The articulation, the emotional weight. Finally, someone remembered the creature has a vocabulary. I need to set my under eye before we end up with creature-like creases. 1 second. But then the movie, it swings so hard into melodrama that it becomes less faithful adaptation and more Shakespeare in the Park, but everyone's really sweaty. And listen, I'm not mad. I'm entertained. But faithful, Mary Shelley was looking down from the afterlife like, sir, what is happening here? Then we have Penny Dreadful, or the version that said, what if Victor was even worse? And honestly, valid. Penny Dreadful does something bold. It remembers the creature is supposed to be intelligent, poetic and heartbreaking. This version speaks. This version aches. And this version is actually recognizable from the novel. Victor, meanwhile, they made him like extra toxic, like astronomically toxic, the kind of man who would emotionally manipulate a corpse. And before you say, that seems like a stretch, I assure you it is not. Is it faithful? Not exactly. It mixes half Victorian literary canon together like a gothic literature smoothie. But does it understand the emotional beating heart of Shelley's original? Yes, absolutely. And for that, we forgive. And then we have the We Swear We're Faithful indie adaptations, or the stage plays, TV specials, the low-budget productions that promise accuracy. Then immediately add a new character named Igor. Igor has never existed in the book. Ever. And every few years, someone releases a truer Frankenstein, and every few years, Victor Frankenstein suddenly has a hunchback assistant, which Mary Shelley did not write at all. And what's my hot take on this? Adding Igor to Frankenstein, adding Igor to Frankenstein is like buying a foundation labeled neutral undertone, and then discovering when you put it on your face that it's straight up orange, and it keeps happening. It was never meant to happen, and I'm tired. So tired. And then we come to 2025. Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, the adaptation we deserve. Please don't fail me, we all said going into that one. So now let's talk about it. Most recent 2025 adaptation. And for legal reasons and my own sanity, I will not spoil plot details. But I will say this. Guillermo del Toro is the patron saint of monsters. This is the man who gave us the amphibious boyfriend from Shape of Water, the haunted child ghost in The Devil's Backbone, the fawn daddy in Pan's Labyrinth. He doesn't do lumbering brute. He does poetry in monster form. Academically speaking, Del Toro has repeatedly said in interviews that he believes the true monster is the institution, the government, or the terrified human who has made the mess. Sound familiar? That's Shelley's entire novel. And if anyone understands that monsters are metaphors for grief, trauma, and the failures of adults, it's absolutely him. And if anyone can restore the creature's humanity after 100 years of Hollywood slander, it's Guillermo. I will die for my practical effects, Del Toro. But even with these attempts to course correct, something was still missing, because every adaptation, even the good ones, kept dancing around the real horror that Mary Shelley wrote. And trust me, the scariest part of Frankenstein is not the monster. Okay, deep breath, because we've talked about how Hollywood changed Frankenstein. We've talked about the makeup crimes. And we talked about how Universal Studios basically gaslit an entire century into believing bolts equal literature. But now we are entering the real horror. The part where Mary Shelley actually wanted us to be afraid. So let me introduce you to Victor Frankenstein, the man, the myth, the red flag. This man spends years studying galvanism, anatomy, chemistry, philosophy, all to create life. He finally succeeds. And then, the very second his creature wakes, before the credits even rolled, Victor says, ew, and runs away. This is like spending 9 months growing a child and then going, actually, no thanks. Victor is the original deadbeat dad. And Mary Shelley makes this painfully clear in the novel. The creature is not born evil. He becomes violent because he is rejected by Victor first, and then by every human that he approaches. Victor is not a tragic genius. I repeat, Victor is not a tragic genius. Victor is a walking case of bad decisions. A man who wanted to play God but didn't want to do any of the paperwork or have any other responsibilities. The creature that Mary Shelley wrote is heart-wrenching. He is abandoned, isolated, intelligent, self-taught, reflective, and he just wants connection. He learns language by listening to a family through a wall, like the world's saddest Duolingo lesson. He saves a child from drowning and then he gets shot for it. He tries to speak, to communicate, and he's met with screams of horror. He spirals into violence not because he is born monstrous, but because the world refuses to acknowledge his humanity. Shelley wasn't writing a monster story. She was writing a grief story, a loneliness story, a story about what happens when you create something and then refuse to love it. And honestly, this is the part that Hollywood never really knows what to do with. Frankenstein is about responsibility. The themes that Mary Shelley actually wrote, well, the ethics of creation, isolation and social rejection, parenthood and abandonment, consequences of unchecked ambition, humanity as something earned through compassion, not appearance. Frankenstein is closer to Black Mirror than it is to Halloween decor. But because Hollywood replaced the tragedy with a giant mute green guy, the entire meaning evaporated. So, why does all of this matter? Well, here's why the story hits harder today than it did in 1818. We are still creating things that we do not understand. Things like AI, bioengineering, automation, tech without accountability, creators distancing themselves from consequences. And Mary Shelley wasn't scared of monsters. She was scared of creators who refuse responsibility for what they make. And honestly, that's the part that every adaptation continues to miss. But if Hollywood erased the message, then what does the real Frankenstein actually teach us? And why did we take the tragedy Mary Shelley wrote and turn it into a cartoon? That's where we have to talk about the lesson that we're supposed to learn and why we keep telling the wrong story. All right, friends, we have dragged Victor through the mud. We've exposed Hollywood's crimes. We've watched the creature go from tragic intellectual to green himbo lawn ornament. So let's bring this home. Mary Shelley didn't write a monster story. She wrote a warning about ambition without empathy, a warning about creation without care, a warning about what happens when you look into the eyes of something that you made and choose fear instead of responsibility. The creature was never the villain. He was the mirror. Victor was the monster. And the real horror was what happens when someone refuses to love the thing that they brought into the world. So, why does every adaptation mess this up? Because tragedy is harder to sell than terror. A green monster staggering around is easy to recognize. A young woman writing the first modern sci-fi tragedy about grief, parental neglect, and moral collapse. Apparently, that was just too complicated for early Hollywood. Pop culture didn't simplify Frankenstein, it sanitized it. And this is the part that hits a little close to home, because we live in a world of victors, engineers building things that they can't control, tech companies abandoning responsibilities, creators distancing themselves from consequences, and a society that still judges monsters by appearances, not by humanity. Mary Shelley wasn't afraid of the creature. She was afraid of the people who looked at him and refused to see a person. So every adaptation tends to get Frankenstein wrong because they keep trying to make a monster story. But Frankenstein was never about the monster. It was about the maker. I mean, the title of the book should be a hint. Frankenstein. Victor Frankenstein. And until we tell that story, the real one, we're going to keep missing the point Mary Shelley carved into the bones of this novel 2 whole centuries ago. Monsters are not born. They are made. So here is our final monstrous look. I used my Frankenstein and Universal Monsters Melt Cosmetics. But I want to know, what do you think? Tell me in the comments below how you feel about the different adaptations of this novel. It's an incredible literary work. It's one of my favorite books. Probably my favorite book, actually. Number 1. It's always right here on my shelf. Have you read the book? If you haven't, you really should. Be sure to join my free Patreon. The link is below. And if you need to watch me blab on about something else while I put on makeup or just talk about D&D, check out one of my other videos here. I'm Betty Rage, your favorite nerdy goth mom, and this was Lashes in Lore, where the magic is messy. The eyeliner is flawless. Sometimes. And we're all just doing our best out here. So be good to each other, love each other, and as always, free mom hugs from me to you. Bye. I'll see you next time.